Hi, everyone. Welcome to this U.S. Farm Report live discussion with USDA Chief Economist Seth Meyer. A double dose of USDA reports today. A lot of hype leading up to these reports. And if you were one that wanted the markets to respond positively, you were not disappointed today. Seth, we'll get into the numbers here in just a second. But overall, a shock to the market. The markets limit up when you look at like corn and soybeans. Did this acreage report surprise you as well?
So I think when you look purely at the economic incentives out there, you and I talk about prices a lot. Prices are very strong, which, should bring producers into the acreage market, should bring those producers acreage to the front. Part of me says, hey, this is the first part of a bid ask process. The farmers have put out their bid and the market has said, hey, that's not enough. And that's why we see prices limit up. I'll just remind folks that, this is kind of, you're watching the ongoing acreage negotiation live, and this survey is the first part of that bid.
Right.
So I would say from a purely price standpoint, and producers don't worry just about price, right? There's the other side of that balance sheet. From a purely price standpoint, however, it's clear that the market was surprised given the commodity prices that we had. And it's not, and I would argue it's not just corn or just soybeans, I think, that surprised the market. I think it is principal crop acreage. So kind of when you combine everything up together and you look at what's the total add up to, I think it's the combined corn and soybean area, given where corn and soybean prices have been. And then I think it's individually corn and individually soybeans when you look at where prices have been. So I think that's why you have seen this response into the marketplace. This is, NASS gathers this as a survey. This is what the producers have said. And clearly the market wants to be sure that they try and incentivize. And so that's why prices are higher.
All right. So if you have not seen the report, real quick, based on this farmer survey that USDA did for this prospective plantings report, USDA's results found 91.1 million acres are intended to be planted in corn, 87.6 for soy, 46.4 for the all wheat number, and 12 million for the all corn number. Okay. So that's where we set today. Seth, I mean, you had these in your February Ag Outlook Forum. You had forecasted a combined corn and soybean acreage number that would hit a record. These numbers do not hit a record. A lot of questions right now. We know there's some acres coming back into play in like North Dakota where they had prevent plant acres this year. I think the question that's being asked right now is, where did these acres go?
Yeah, and when you look at the total, it is harder to come up. It's not as if they're a little piece of the story. There's a little piece of the story that wheat acres came in a little bit higher, but that's a small part of the story. And again, I go back to, we're talking about a combined principal crop area that is higher than the last 2 years. But remember, those last 2 years had significant prevent plant. But we're talking about a combined principal crop area lower than we saw from, say, 2015 to 2018, when prices were lower than they are now, and well below where they were from, say, 2012 to 2014, when prices are, we're getting back into those price ranges that we saw back in 13, 14. So I think it is a interesting, curious response as to producers reporting this acreage level that we've got. Now, we can pick at it around the corners and pick at, costs. We can pick at other issues as well, too. But it is curious in the total, and the total of corn and beans, and the total of acres and corn and beans independently.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Seth, we aired a story on Ag Day this morning where a farmer said, well, even with these added input costs, listen, I'm as excited to plant this year as I've been since 2007, 2008, right? I mean, there's excitement to plant this year. What about sorghum, though, Seth? Because we know that sorghum prices have been extremely strong thanks to this added Chinese demand. We know basis for sorghum has been amazing. And talking to sorghum producers, they thought they may buy some acres this year, maybe from cotton, maybe from some other areas. How does sorghum play into this mix?
So I'll go back to, there are little stories in there about crop mix, and sorghum being one of these, where we're seeing sorghum area pop back up more along the lines of what we saw in 2015. You know, you and I have talked about what the Chinese are taking and what they took a lot of things that are corn equivalents in 2015. They're still taking a lot of corn, and now they're taking a lot of sorghum. So I think that remains the story again. And certainly part of what you're seeing under there in the crop mix is higher sorghum area. But again, I'll go back to the fact that overall principal crop area is still a couple million acres lower than what we averaged from 15 to 18 for kind of adding everything together. So that isn't necessarily the story on acreage in total.
Okay. Well, Seth, I mean, I had analysts on the show last weekend. So this 87.6 million acres for soybeans, pretty close to what Farmers Business Network, their farmer survey, released. And so I gave that number to analysts last weekend, and I said, what would this mean? And they said, this would be bullish. This would mean that we are looking, even with a 50 bushel per acre yield, we are going to need soybeans. When you look at an acreage number for soybeans that comes under 88 million acres, knowing the tight supplies that we're in today, what does this tell you moving forward, Seth?
So, and I think that you don't even have to rely on me to tell you this, Tyne. I think you can look at what the market thinks about this as well, too, and the strength that put in prices all the way through harvest. So I will tell you that the WSDA folks will wrap some of this information into their May numbers. We'll see their next take on it. You know, they look at it at the Ag Outlook Forum. They'll roll this into their May numbers. But I think you can see from the market response that this tightens up the market's expectations about not, you know, we were looking at falling prices through harvest and falling prices beyond that, saying, hey, you know, with those acreage numbers, we'll see good sized production. I think this puts it in a different view and potentially saying at these acreages will be tighter. And I think you get some combination of that. You know, we haven't even talked about the stocks report yet.
Right.
Beans, stocks came in about as expected, but here on corn as well too, you added a little bit, even more fuel to the fire on corn stocks now, because, you know, we'd seen a lot of inversion, very high prices falling into harvest and then falling when you tried to price it out into the next season. You know, I think what this did is potentially give folks a signal. Hey, maybe this is going to last a little bit longer at these acreage numbers, but I will tell you that at the briefing we talked about, hey, the plate of cookies is coming back around. You're going to have the market is trying to incentivize these folks to plant more.
Yeah, Seth, you mentioned listening to the markets. So in case you have not seen the markets yet today, limit up. We have soybeans right now up 70 cents, corn up 25 cents, wheat up 19 cents. The market's telling us, listen, these with the demand picture, with the tight supplies, this is not enough acres. So Seth, just before we let you go, though, this is just the first chapter. You mentioned that. We're going to have another estimate coming out from USDA farmer-based survey in June. This is just the first chapter of this story, but this does set us up for an interesting price scenario this year if these original acreage forecasts do come to fruition.
No, absolutely. Like I said, this is like observing, you know, you're watching two people negotiate and you're only getting the first part of that negotiation, right? This is an intention report. It's prospective plantings. It's a farmer's intention. The market has come back in and said, here's a little more, plant a little more. That's the signal that they're giving. And so we don't really get a NAS view of what the result is until June. So while we kind of think about them as being the same thing, it's really, hey, we're observing the first part of the negotiation, and then we're observing the end of the negotiation, but nothing in between.
Seth, I know it's a busy day for you too, so I really appreciate you joining us to just give us some highlights. Like I said, if you were hoping that this would, produce some bullish prices, that's what it did today. So Seth Meyer, two big reports. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tyne.
All right. Join us this weekend. We'll have our marketing analysts that digest these reports. You know, what does this mean for prices moving forward? We're going to talk about that this weekend on the show, some highlights from that. But boy, what a big explosive report today. We are seeing that in the prices. Tune into US Farm Report this weekend for a full rundown of these reports. Also, don't forget Ag Day tomorrow morning, agday.com, or find us on your local affiliate. Ag Day will have these reports and digest the numbers tomorrow morning as well. So we hope to see you there.